So then we are back with more understanding from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find in the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Itzaelic lineage, so then we can understand the time of the end. As per Yeshayahu the prophet, whom Israel have destroyed, and then not obeying what he said, we find then very interesting information regarding the time of the end as per this great prophet, the 61st chapter, where then he explains the Messiah completing the spring feast and then later autumn feast. We find then very interesting information regarding then the Mount Gerizim, and when the Messiah then he was completing the spring feast, he went to the mountain of favor. It's very amazing when then the favor and the curse the Creator then decided to do in Deuteronomy or Devarim, where we find then many areas of the scripture where shows us without a doubt the Messiah then he went out of Jerusalem and he went to Mount Gerizim, was then the mountain of favor, where he transfigured himself. Up there on the Mount Gerizim showed up to him Moshe and Eliyahu, then symbolizing then obviously the laws and the prophets. From there, the mountain of favor, because of the obedience, the Messiah then he opened the seals of Galah. And then he came down from the mountain and he spent 2 days with the Samaritans. 2 Yom days. What does it mean, 2 Yom days? 1,000 years each. When he was on Mount Gerizim, 5032. When he was born, 4999. The computer was able to calculate because of the great star recorded, and then the many number of lunar views of every month, and also the census of the time, and most importantly, it was then the time of Sukkah, Feast of Tabernacles, first day of Feast of Tabernacles. The Messiah came and he inhabited with the set apart. So then, while then our country unwisely spends time with Israel, an absolutely cursed spit of land where there is no reason to be in the planet, and then we find then the government mixing up itself with religion and going against gays and lesbians for no reason. So we are then understanding a couple of simultaneous understanding, because we must understand where tabernacling comes from in religion. So then when we read Deuteronomy chapter number 11, okay, then we find many interesting areas where then it states very clearly regarding then Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal. The favor upon the Mount Gerizim, and then the curses upon Mount Ebal. Those who were then obedient, obviously they would be favored. And those who were not obedient, they would be cursed. But we are not speaking of the world, we are speaking of the set apart. The rest of the world, besides the set apart, they are not included in this holy plan. There is another type of relationship linked with the holy cities. So where do we find then these days where then the Messiah giving orders to other people of the world where they are not even part of? And then worse, then the government decides to go against the gays and lesbians for no reason, because they are not part of it. There is no tabernacling in the earth. Where do we find tabernacling? There isn't available yet. So the Messiah then, he left Jerusalem and he went to Mount Gerizim, Mount of Favor. There he transfigurated, he opened the seals, and then the horses and so on and so forth were already released. And then he came down, and do you want to prove of it? What went on after the Messiah then left Mount Gerizim? Did he not go back to Jerusalem and got destroyed? It shows you Israel is cursed. That's why the Messiah came out of Jerusalem, came out of Israel, because the nation decided to be on the side of curse, not the side of favor. That's why they destroy the prophets, they slaughter Yirmiyahu the prophet, but then they use the holy instructions for their own gain. But there is no tabernacling, so the rest of it is psychological problem where people can't face the truth. Israel is not relevant. But then the psychological side of the people, they were so brainwashed for so long. And then we find our president wishy-washy everywhere. If he goes over there, speaks with the Islamic people, then he becomes Islam. If he goes over there in Israel, he becomes an Israelite. If he comes to America, he is not sure what he is. You know, the doctrines of demons and waves of doctrine. In Israel, it's cursed. It's a cursed nation. That's why the Messiah had to get out of there and go then to Mount Gerizim to do the rest of the plan of the salvation of the Gentiles, because the nation was cursed. That's why they're going to be left for the very end of the entire restoration period, because they're absolutely cursed people. So this is story, because God had chosen His nation. He did not. He did not. He rescued the people because He instructed them how to deal with Himself. Tabernacling. If they don't tabernacling, there is no reason for their existence. But then the world was mesmerized for more than 1,000 years. So then let's evaluate then from this enlightenment what Daniel has stated. Because in the second chapter of Daniel, he gives us the answer. And he said, then tabernacling would be mixed with the world, but not of the point of tabernacling itself. They would scoundrelize themselves for a long time, because then he's explaining the time of restoration. So then tabernacling meant what the Creator has given as holy would be mixed with the world. Because the prophet Daniel was explaining of tabernacling, he was understanding tabernacling as a whole, while then giving the understanding of 1,000 years of mixing, becoming unholy. They are cursed. Israel is a cursed nation. Everywhere they go, they only provoke wars. That's why the Messiah had to come out of Jerusalem, and he went then to Mount Gerizim, and he was received gladly. After such a celebration where the Messiah then opened the seals, then he did reveal himself. He spent 2 Yom days with the people. He went back to Jerusalem, and he was destroyed, indicating the nation was cursed. But then the situation goes further regarding then the layer of the Gentiles. We are not taxing as we should be doing. Because Daniel was explaining from a diplomat's viewpoint, a tradesperson, and also a prophet. So don't take the label as prophet only. He was a diplomat, he was also a tradesperson, and he was a politician. Netanyahu is absolutely a knucklehead. He's dumb. He's absolutely dumb beyond measure. You don't understand how dumb the Prime Minister of Israel is. But then he takes his dumb side and he mesmerizes the other people. And our president goes over there and he becomes like a child. He became like a child. Spend some time over there, eat a piece of dry bread, and then his mind gets mesmerized. You know what mesmerization means? That's what Shaliach Shaul said, going with every wave of doctrine. At some point he's Islamic, at some point he's Israelite. Winds of doctrine, you know, waves, always unstable. And our president became dumb as the prime minister. Both of them are dumb. What should we be doing, since we understand without a shadow of a doubt there is no tabernacling in Israel? The Messiah went out as the living tabernacle. He went to the Mount Gerizim. Then he said, "Go therefore." This is what he was saying. Not during the time that he was on Mount Gerizim, but he was indicating. When he was there, then would the people go out as he did go out. He went back to Jerusalem. Those cursed people destroyed him. Then he returned from the dead, yet they did not believe him. Then he said, proud of his ascension, "Go therefore around the world," because he already gave the example on Mount Gerizim. In Israel, cursed ever since. And the Prime Minister of Israel is a dumb person. And he drags our own president and both of them, the dual dumb. The Prime Minister because he doesn't understand his scripture. And then our president because he does not know his objectives. What has the Messiah told us to do? He is stating in Galah chapter 1:8, the freighters are going to be in charge of the world. The prophecy of the Messiah then states very plainly, via then tabernacling, via Daniel the prophet. What did he say? Did he not say then the kingdoms of the earth would be divided? The division means in a spirit. They would not be able to adhere to each other as they thought they would. What kind of a period of time we are speaking of? We are speaking of the time of deceit. And then, after the time of deceit, when you layer the second chapter with the 12th chapter, don't you read then sometimes, where do you think is layer upon layer? And it is true. Layer upon layer. But this counterlies scripture, how does it read? Precept upon precept, line upon line. No, it's layer upon layer. So begin to think layer upon layer. Second chapter is layered with a 12th. So then kingdoms shall be divided. Then you have to layer this understanding with Yeshayahu, the 61st chapter. And then at the end of the 1,000 years, people would go to and fro. Also as during the entire time of the 1,000 years. But then at the end, knowledge would increase. And then a time of restoration, where nations would be then divided, because he's explaining then when the tabernacling understanding would be mixed with the world. We are speaking after this period where then tabernacling is then returning. But then the dual dumb, they don't understand what then the politician Daniel is explaining. The dumb duet. So then, where we find the evidence? The Messiah said precisely, then the freighters of the earth, kingdoms will be divided. He is giving a spiritual understanding of unity based on Babylonian system. They would be divided. What does make this division? It is yet the system coming from the east. China is the leader of the world's market. Knowledge would increase. What do you understand? Computers. The next shortly 36 months is coming a system from the east where you can download on your computer, you can make investments, you can make purchases, you can pay your people via this system. When this system then is downloaded on a computer, nations are going to be divided. How are they going to be divided? Because they're going to take their resources from their subsystems generated during the time of deceit. And they're going to invest their funding in the system. The Chinese system yet coming. Thus the nations would be divided. And then you understand the freighters would be in charge. Obviously, because people, they want their parcels. Retailers out of work. Why are they going to be out of work? Because you can get a product from China for 10. If you go over there in the store, you have to buy 2 for 20. Are you going to buy then your pair of pants for 20? If you can, it's because you are very fortunate. It's not the case with the rest of the country. So the system, when it comes, is going to make division amongst the nations. Subsystems are going to be non-active. Read the scripture. But then the duo dumb, not only they don't do what the Messiah said, there is no tabernacling in Israel, and we are not taxing as we should have. Do you understand when the system comes and we are not then taxing? Because you can do investments and purchases at the same time, and you can pay your people via your company with the system. I don't think the government can go over there and try to change around, because it's property of the Chinese government. You can't tamper with. What else can we say? The Messiah said, give to the government what belongs to the government. Give God what belongs to God. But rather than taxing, then the government decides to pick a fight against the gays and lesbians. For what reason? They are being posed with religion. Either there is tabernacling or religion. And then when the system comes from the east, nations are going to simply download in their computers, and some of the nations, they are going to make the Chinese system their primary governmental system. The world is going to change overnight. And thousands of politicians are going to be kicked out from the government because there is no reason of having them. The new system is self-regulated. It doesn't have to have politicians anymore. So then the Messiah said, as far as tabernacling is concerned, regarding then Galah 1:8. What does it mean, Galah 1:8? It is related with the system. So let's try to understand what the Messiah then is explaining regarding the time of restoration. Restoring tabernacling. But then a system is coming. Israel is going to be locked on the system. They are going to invest in the system. You know what's going to become of us? Buy USA. Israel is going to turn their back on us. Why? Because the Messiah already gave the answer. So then, in Galah 1:8, verse 4, come out of them, my people. Speaking of the system. Why then has the Messiah explained to come out of the system, and then later he was explaining then the linen, then ivory and so on and so forth, and so many of those trade understandings of the time of the end, and he explains then the freighters of the earth. What can you deduce from these? There won't be any more relationship with Israel and the United States. What's going to have is trade. Whosoever is maintaining a positive balance in the system stays in the system. Because the nations are going to be divided. There won't be any more Eurozone. There won't be any more United Kingdom. There is no reason for those anymore. Why do the kingdoms have to be united? Because there was no tabernacling. It has to have some sort of an order during the time of 1,000 years of deceit. But it's no longer the case. Then tabernacling is returning, and the Messiah already gave the answer. And thank God, he decided then to use the Chinese system as a neutral system amongst the nations. Because Israel is dumb. That's why the Messiah said, come out of the system. Because they are dumb.